Welcome back. This is Bob Dust, your instructor in the ITP 244, 245 classes at Runners Community College. Today we will discuss helpers, partial pages, JavaScript, and see how we can bring all these together in one time. So let's move to our solution here. This is the ITP 244 MVC solution, and we're going to start by looking at our HTML transcript that we looked at in class briefly at the end of class last week. This is the student transcript helper. I just showed you this. I'm not going to go through all this, but what this will do is this will create a helper that takes a student model, converts it to a transcript object, and then creates a display from there. Let's look at the student transcript briefly here by going to our models and look at the transcript. Nothing too fancy here. It just takes a student object and create some enrollment objects out of it to show what courses the student has enrolled in, and the is enrolled tells us if they are enrolled or not. So that's our student transcript model. So we take that transcript object here, and we're going to add a little tag here that just says transcript on it. We're going to do a tag builder to create a table. In our table, we will create we add some attributes. One is the ID for student enrolled. We add some CSS classes for table, make the table striped. We add a caption here, and then we add the table header. If you come look at the header, this is just the TR. We created TR and then some TH tags to show the column headings. Then we create the table body. The table body just creates some for every course in the transcript. Now the enrollment shows every course and whether they are enrolled or not with the is enrolled property. And we create a table row for every course in our transcript. Let's look at that briefly. And this is just a TR tag here that has some properties in it, some attributes. That's it. Okay, so that's our helper. I'm not going to go into that anymore, but that's what the helper does. So let's take a look at a controller. Let's create a partial page. Okay, so we're going to create we just looked at the HTML helper for transcript. So now let's look at our partial page. So to do this, we're going to go to our student controller over here, and we will create a new view for our controller. So let's go to the bottom of our student controller. I'm going to add an action result. I'm going to name it transcript with an underscore. And I'm going to pass it an ID. It's typical to use underscores to begin partial views. That's just, I don't know why it started out that way, but it's a common way to identify partial pages. So I'm going to create a student object. Go to my data contents, create a student object, and we'll convert that to a transcript. You remember from our transcript model, our constructor, we pass it a student object, and it converts that student into a transcript. And then we will return a partial view, passing it our transcript object. So here is our controller to create a partial view. The model will be a transcript model, which we converted from our ID for student by creating a new transcript object, and then we will call the partial view. So now let's right click on our action method, and we will add a view. This will be an MVC5 view. We will call this transcript. We will pass be an empty, but we will pass it the transcript object. And we will create this as a partial view. Notice with a partial view, there is no layout page because a partial view is embedded into another page, and that page will have the layout view. So let's click add here. Takes it a few seconds. That's not good. This is saying that we don't have a key attribute in the transcript. Give me 1 minute, I'll take care of that. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to create this time without I'm going to create an empty view. So we're going to do add view, MVC5 view, add, transcript. We're going to leave it empty. It's going to be created as a partial view again, and we'll click add. And this opens up with a blank page here. I'm going to add my using statement for my helpers. I'm going to add a model, which will be a ITP 244.models.transcript. And I'm going to add an H3 tag, transcript for model.student.name. That would be my H3 tag. Again, this could be a partial page, which means this will be part of another page. So I'm going to start with an H3 tag, and then I'm going to add my helper called student transcript. I'm going to pass it my model. So here is a partial page. Again, this is a page embedded in another page. I add my helpers assembly. I add my model for my transcript. I create a H3 tag as a heading for transcript for model student name. And then I call my HTML helper, which, if you remember, will build a table and put in our transcript information into there. So now let's embed this into our details page. So this will be our partial page. We're going to, so we already added the view transcript in our student controllers and our view. So now let's use this in our student details page. So let's go to our student details page. I'm going to double click on that. And here is our details page. This is fairly standard. It shows the first name, last name, some interesting things about the student. And what we want to do is at the bottom of this page, is to add our HTML helper for our student transcript. I meant partial view. So let's add our partial view. And this will be our transcript. Notice the underscore at the beginning. And we will pass it a new ITP-244-MVC.models.transcript. And we will pass it our model. Okay, let's take a little peek at this. And I'm going to right click on my student index, and we will view this in our browser. Here is our list of students. Let's click on our details for Annabelle Lee. And you see here we have our transcript for Annabelle Lee, which came from our view. And we redundantly put in the word transcript in here. But here is our, here is our helper for the transcript. We have our courses, our instructor, the check marks is if they have enrolled or not, and then the grade for the student. Let's go back and look at the code one more time. This is our index view. Don't want to see that. So all we do down here is we put in a partial page. So the top part of the page is the details about the student, their name, their birth date, their email address. And then we have this partial page, which lays in at the bottom of the page. And it displays the helper from the partial view. Looking at the partial view, all it does is it calls the helper that will render the partial view for our student's transcript. That's how all this ties together. So let's look at a couple more things before we end this. Let me show you a couple more things. All right, so let's look at another little helper here. This is called the RBL Helper. And this will integrate a little JavaScript into our page here. And what the JavaScript will do is, what the helper will do will be to create a radio button list control that takes our identity and creates a radio button list out of it that has a little built-in smarts to it. Let's take a peek. I'm going to go to my helpers extension page over here. I'm going to create another helper. We'll call it RBL, public static MVC, MVC HTML string RBL for radio button list, this HTML helper, and we'll make this an IEnumerable. I can't pronounce it. of an I-entity. Remember our I-entity from before, which has an ID and a name on it? And we'll call this items. So we'll take a list of any collection of I-entity objects. Remember from before, we look at our student over here. We have this I-entity in here, which is an interface which has properties of ID and name. And if we look at our student I-entity, we see we indeed have an ID, which returns a student ID. And we already had a name down here, which returns first name and last name. So in our RBL Helper over here, we're going to create a string builder. And I think I need I don't need it. Okay, string builder, HTML, equal to new string builder. And I'm going to do a for each through my collection of items. And for each one of these, I'm going to do a tag builder. Because these are going to be radio buttons, it will be a type input. I'm going to add a few attributes. One for ID. I'm just going to name this RBL. I'm going to put a pipe symbol here and the item. I want the ID number of the item. If it's an I-entity, why is that underscored? I'm not sure why that's underscored. That's good. Okay. Has no extension. Oh, is it just ID? That's it. Nope. It is uppercase. Hold on a minute. I see it. It should be item up here, and this should be singular. A lot of things kill us, don't they? All right, so we're going to add an attribute. So each radio button attribute will have the ID of RBL pipe, and then we'll put whatever the item ID is up here. Continue on, we'll do tag merge attribute. We'll add a name. This will be the name of our group. We just could call it RBL group. Add another one for type. And this will be a radio. We want the type of the input to be a radio button. I'm going to add a value. And this will be of type item.id.toString, because it has to be a string. And now I'm going to add a event handler called unChange. So every time the tag has a change value, we'll have it execute on entity change, and we're going to pass it the ID number of the item. So every time there's a change, my spelling's not too good, we will execute a JavaScript method named onEntityChange. And we will pass it the value of the ID of the item up here, which if you remember is a iEntity. And just to pretty it up a little bit, I'm going to add a space in front of it. It's equal to, in JavaScript, we do a space, HTML, MVC, and we'll do a plus, and we'll put in the item name. And, oops. And we'll do HTML append, and we'll put in our tag. And then after the for each, we will return a new MVC HTML string, and we'll pass it our HTML as a toString. So let's review this code briefly. We're going to create a string builder. String builder is a way to add, append strings together. So we're going to create a string for, we're going to create a tag for each item in our collection of iEntity items. This will be an input method. Input control. The ID will be RBL pipe, and then the item ID. The attribute name will be RBL group. It should be a radio button type. The value of the button will be the value of the ID as a string. We will call the onChange event handler, and we'll pass it the JavaScript onEntityChange, and the value of that will be the ID number of the item. And then the inner HTML, which will be what displays, we'll put a space in there, and the name of the item, and then we append our HTML builder will be each tag that we created. After we iterate it through all the tags, we will return the HTML MVC HTML string, passing in our HTML value. Okay, now let's go to our index for our students. This looks fairly familiar to you, I hope. This is just a list of our students. And what we're going to do is to add our RBL Helper to this, and we'll be able to view the student transcripts right from the index page. On my index page, right after my student's title, first thing I will do is add a HTML RBL. I'm going to pass it my model. This is my helper that we just created. I'm going to execute it from here. Now remember, it is looking for a JavaScript code to handle the onEntity change. So let's add a little JavaScript up here. Again, the purpose of this tutorial is not to teach you JavaScript, but to show you how we can embed some JavaScript into our MVC page. I'm going to add a function here. The name of that function we created was called onEntityChange, and we will pass it a student ID. And what this is going to do is look for a container. We'll use a little bit of jQuery in here. student transcript. And then we're going to load the container with a URL action, and we're going to pass it our partial view. And we're going to pass it the ID number, whoops, equal that plus our student ID number. So this will call the URL action passing it the name of our partial view of transcript, and we will pass it the ID number of our student ID number. I put that question mark in there. Now what we need is a div called student transcript. Let's add that right below our RBL Helper, and we'll give this an ID of student transcript. Oh, I already have one in there. Okay. So I have this div called ID, with an ID of student transcript. My JavaScript will search for the container, the div with the ID, with the pound sign means look for the ID number of student transcript, and it will replace whatever is in this div with our partial view of transcript, passing in our student ID number, which was passed to us in our code. All right, let's take a look at this in action. I'm going to save this. So I'm going to go to my index over here. Actually, I already have it open. I will flip to that. Here is my, this is my details. Let me go back to my list of students. We see now we have a radio button list here. May not be the best design because here we have a listing of them. Here we have a radio button list, but this is for illustrative purposes. We have Annabelle Lee, Huguenot, and Skipwith. If I click on one of these, we now have a transcript shows up for Huguenot, and there's Huguenot's transcript. If I click on Annabelle Lee, it changes to Annabelle Lee and Skipwith. So the beauty of this is, if you notice, every time I do this, it is not reloading the entire page. It is only reloading a part or partial of the page, which is this part here. So as I click on these, I get fairly quick response because I'm not having to reload the entire page. So now I can see each student's transcript from my partial view, which is calling my HTML helper, this is my RBL list, HBL helper, and it's calling my JavaScript, which calls my partial view. And all that is done with just this little bit of code here, where I have my JavaScript, which is finding my div student transcript, and it replaces it with the partial view of transcript, passing it the student ID number. That is in my student controller over here. Pass it the ID number, it creates a transcript, and executes the partial view, passing it my transcript object. Look at the transcript again. Not much here. We pass it a transcript object in the model, and that executes my helper called student transcript. It passes it the model object again. This all ties together, and it looks really good when we're done. So let's take a look here, and one more time, just take a quick gander at it, see what it's doing. And we click on the details. Details is showing us the transcript as well. So we're reusing the code. If you want to make a change to it anywhere, we change it one place and we're good. So this is the partial page of the detail. Go back to the list, click on the student up here, and we also have the partial page there as well. So we are reusing our code, and we're giving fairly good response to our user. And so that shows us our JavaScript, how we integrated into the student index view. And again, I am Bob Dust, your instructor in the ITP 244-245 class at Reynolds Community College. Again, this was to show how we integrate using helpers, partial pages, and a little bit of JavaScript in our user interface. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.